All right.
Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to April's OSRBC Author Chat. We are so happy you could join us this evening as we host a very exciting new historical romance author who is making big waves in the industry. Joining us tonight to chat about the first book in her Bevoir's Library series, Ne'er Duke Well, is the delightful Alexandra Vasti. So for anyone who's new here, we're gonna have Megan acting as our moderator in the chat. We ask everyone keeps themselves on mute throughout the evening to aid in our recording quality. And if you have questions, please submit them in the chat panel. We will be checking in with Megan throughout the night for her to ask your questions to Alexandra. With that, let's get things started. We always like to kick off with some icebreaker questions, just some fun things to warm up as people are still joining us and getting us settled before we talk about Near Do Well. With that, I hand it over to Donna for the first question.
All right. If you had to pick your favorite main character from any romance series to be your book boyfriend or girlfriend, who would you choose?
Or is this for me?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought this was like an icebreaker for everyone. I was like very eager to hear what
I
other people were going to
mean,
say. I'm so sorry. My favorite, oh, that's really hard actually. Because like there's some books where I'm like, oh, like I love this book, like I love these characters, but like I personally would not want to would not want to go home with them. You know what I mean? Like they can stay over there. So I don't know. That's a tough question. I don't think I'm like not ready for this question. I'm like literally like looking around at like books on my shelf. So this was one of my favorite books that I read last year. And I'm gonna say maybe Kit Griffiths from this book. Kit is like really delightful and super charming, and I feel like probably would go along with my chaos a little bit.
fair, completely fair.
Oh, did you like it?
I have not read that one, but it is a fair answer on all fronts. It is a fair thing to be suddenly the not loving something, reading it, and then it not wanting to come home with you is also a completely fair answer. We
Yeah.
often comment that on a regular
Yes.
basis about things. So,
Yeah.
Yes. I would like them in the book, but not in real life.
My favorite author is Laura Kinsale, and one of my favorite Kinsales is called Lessons in French. And I love this book. I love the hero of the book, but like, oh my gosh, like that wouldn't he could stay away. I'm not interested in having him personally, but he's just so chaotic. Like I need someone like a little more calm. Like I'm the chaotic one. We don't need to double down on the chaos.
So for the next one is we ask all our visiting authors this after the topic came up with one of our first guests. Do you have a chocolate drawer?
A chocolate drawer? No.
No.
That sounds amazing. I wish I had a chocolate drawer, but no, I do not have a chocolate drawer. If I had a chocolate drawer, my children would just raid it and then it would be an empty drawer.
that seems to be a common theme.
Yes.
Our empty nest authors seem to have chocolate stashes, and they're not necessarily isolated to drawers. And
Some
then,
of our cabinets.
yeah, then the ones with small children are like, no, there's no way I can keep things in my house.
My son is 3 and he's like, I keep forgetting that he can like reach stuff now, so I'll think like, oh, I've put this knife up quite high. Then he's wandering around the house with like a serrated knife. And I'm like, what happened? When did you get that doll? How can you reach up there now? So yeah, no chocolate drawer. Full
Oh,
or empty.
all right. If you could have a meal with any author from the past, who would you pick?
I always say Jane Austen for this question because I think like especially if like I could transport Jane Austen like to today and have like her like knowledge have her have like knowledge of 2025 because I feel like she would have like really great devastating insights about our society. That's what I would like. I would like an updated Jane Austen and I would just like listen quietly and ask her leading questions for several hours.
We would all, I think, like to talk to her.
I know. I always feel like if she were like alive today, she would be very active on social media and she would like have like so many zingers.
Either that or she'd be so disappointed.
You know, she was disappointed then, she would just disappointed now.
If you were a shapeshifter, what would be your animal form?
These questions are so hard. If I were a shapeshifter, what would be my animal form? Oh my, I feel like I need like a month to like think properly and like weigh the benefits of all the animals that I could be. I guess, I'm torn between like something that could like fly, you know, like away from trouble, or like, but also something that could just like stomp and just like an elephant. Like if I ran into trouble, I'm gonna say an elephant. That would be my shapeshifter. But it's very unhelpful if you're like inside a building, but I'm gonna go with it. I've committed now.
See, I'm a dog person in real life, but I actually think I'm probably, if I was a shapeshifter, I'd probably end up being a cat. So, I mean, it's kind
Yeah.
of,
It would be hard to be anything that didn't have like hands. You know what I mean? Like that would be very challenging.
that's a good point.
You're
I've never thought about that.
a cat and all of a sudden you're like, dang it, I can't like open my own bag of food. I have to go kill a lizard.
Oh gosh, you might kill us for this one, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Oh,
If you
no.
had to be trapped in a house with five other authors, a hostage writer's retreat of sorts, who would you want to be trapped with?
Okay, I can answer. No, I can answer them very easily because like in like a week, like a week and a half, I'm going on a writer's retreat. So, and I'm choosing to be trapped in a house with these other writers. So I, I think I've already answered the question. So I'm going on a writer's retreat next week with Ellie Palmer, Nana Kumar, Ali Hazelwood, and Ehibor Okusun. So there, I guess that's only four. So I don't know. I have to invite one more person to come join our retreat. But I think it's gonna be fun. And hopefully we'll get a lot of writing done. We'll see. Fingers crossed.
That does sound like a lot of fun.
Yes, we're all staying at Nana's house, and she invited us all, and then she's like, by the way, I only have one guest room. We're like, wait, you invited four people to your wedding? So we're gonna be like piled in like a pile of puppies, and writing some books. I think it's gonna be really fun. They're really
It
nice.
sounds like fun. Um, so do you remember the first romance novel you read or the first one that got you hooked onto romance?
Yes. Okay. This is an easier question. The first romance novel I ever read was Whitney, My Love by Judith McNaught, which my mother gave me when I was 11. So if you've ever read Whitney, My Love, like this is just a bananas choice to give your 11-year-old. Like he beats her with a riding crop. Like it is really, but you know what? She was right because I loved it. And you know, and here I am. So I don't know if it worked or like it went very poorly. I'm not sure. But yeah, that was my first romance, my first historical romance. I loved it so much. I was like a little disturbed, but like also in a good way. Like I was like, oh, give me more. I need to keep reading. So yes, I devoured every book that she had written up to that point, and then started reading lots of other historicals around then as well.
Okay. So, if you could write something that would be published in Belvoir's library, what would you want to write to get published there?
In addition to like the books I've already written, like I actually feel like my books would fit quite well in the canon.
I
Well, I
mean,
will say
anything that you would want to just put into circulation out there.
put in circulation out there. Well, I will say I don't know. I so the third book in the Belvoir series is called Ladies in Hating. And it is about a pair of rival Gothic novelists who fall in love. And one of the things that I had to do in writing this book was like make up their like bibliography, like all the books that they had written. And there's two of them and they've both been like active for years. So I had to like make up a lot of fake Gothic novels and like quote from them and like have plots for them. And it was so fun. All of these like fictional Gothic novels. So it really made me want to write like some of these like really wacky, like I don't write horror at all, like Ladies in Hating, they're gothic novelists and there's a haunted house, but it's like funny, it's like Northanger Abbey, it's not like really spooky, but it made me want to write like a spooky gothic novel, especially because now I have titles for like 20 of them.
That would be fun. So now let's transition into what everyone came here to actually talk about. Ne'er do well. What was the original inspiration for Selena and Peter?
Okay, so I can tell you that. So Selena was where I started with this book. And I came up with sort of like I wanted to write this book for her because I was thinking about how in a lot of historical romances, and again, I've been reading historical romance for 25 years. I love it so much. But in a lot of historical romances, there's kind of like the aunt character who like comes in and she's like sort of like, doing all the machinations and kind of, like Lady Danbury and Bridgerton, not that she's their aunt, but she's like the sort of like older woman matron who's like fixing things and kind of trying to run things behind the scenes. And a lot of my favorite romances have a character like that. And I thought, why does she never get a story? Like, where is her romance, So that was my kind of the seed of the idea for Selena was that she was going to be this character who, kind of comes in and is like a fixer and is very managing and she wants like she kind of moves all the pieces and sets up the pieces on the chessboard a little bit. So I came up with her character and then I was like, well, obviously I need to like pair her with someone who is gonna mess her up, who's gonna come in and like explode the chessboard and all the pieces are gonna go flying. So I wanted to pair her with someone really kind of who's chaotic and who's gonna push her and challenge her in a lot of ways that she needed. So that was where I came up with Peter. And so I had the idea that he was gonna go to her to like get made respectable, right? Because she has this reputation for kind of being in charge of things. So I had the idea that he was going to go to her and ask for her help. And obviously, 'cause it's a romance novel, she was going to, like say you need to get married, right? And so actually the idea for Belfour's Library, which is now kind of like the hook of the whole series, was actually like the last thing that I came up with for this book. Like I came up with their characters first, and then I thought, okay, well, they're gonna fall in love. There needs to be some reason that they can't just like get married, or else the book is like 40 pages long. It's quite short. It's over. They fall in love. It's over. So I had to come up with some kind of reason or some kind of stumbling block. And I thought about her character and I thought she has this personality where she's a fixer. And I thought she's going to look at the world around her and what is she going to see as a problem that she's going to want to fix. And so that was where Belfour's Library came from, which was kind of the last piece of the puzzle for this book.
All right. Delving into Selena and Peter a little bit more, the chemistry between them it's sizzling. So, how did you approach building their relation dynamics all throughout the story just to keep it where I mean, every time they're on page together, I mean, you felt it. So, it was good. It was really good.
Glad. I love hearing that. Yeah, I guess I don't know exactly. I it was sort of a fun book to write because they get married halfway through. Spoiler. If you've not read it yet, now you know. Which is, I think, in some books could be like the end, or kind of like a lessening of the tension. So it was definitely challenging in a way to keep writing to where people were invested in the outside plot dynamics and wanting to find out like what's going to happen with the library, what's going to happen with the kids. And I really tried to build in a lot of like emotional tension that like, okay, even though they've consummated their relationship, like there's still a lot left unresolved between them emotionally. Yeah, I try to make sure that like the physical chemistry and kind of like the emotional parts of their relationship are sort of building together. So even if, maybe they've had sex or whatever it is, like there's still stuff that they need to resolve and that they need to get through. Yeah, it was also quite fun because I liked writing her character because there's like a lot of stuff that she's read, but like that she's not, like she doesn't know how to pronounce it necessarily, or like, there's like words that she's heard of that he's never heard of because she has all this like book knowledge. And that was a really fun and kind of comical dynamic to write for me. I enjoyed writing that a lot. He's like so
So,
easygoing. Whatever she comes up with, he's like, all right, tell me more. What page is that on? Let's give it a whirl.
so speaking of the library, is there a historical precedent for Selena's circulating library for women that inspired you to create Belvoirs for the book?
Not that I know of. If there was, it's a very well kept secret that has not entered the historical record. But all the books that they talk about whenever they mention like a specific book, those are all real. So that was something that I had a lot of fun doing was doing the research for if a library like this did exist, what kind of books, might be in it? What would sex education have looked like in the period? How might texts like that have existed and been circulated? What might people really have actually known? And of course, it's just like today, right, where everybody's experience is going to be different, and some people are going to, have a really thorough, maybe, have parents who are very open about things, and some people aren't, and that's the same thing as in the 21st century. But the texts are real. So that was quite fun to kind of stock the shelves with texts, with diagrams or texts with sexy stories or things like that. It was quite fun.
Did you find it challenging to include Freddie and Lou in your writing? We asked because we found their addition to the story delightful and really well done, specifically their banter with Peter and Selena.
Yeah, I really love writing them. It's quite nice, like when you write your first book and you don't know anything about like readers, and I had no idea that like lots of people hate kids in romance, and like maybe today I might have like not included them, but I'm glad I didn't know that because that was how I saw the story going, and I loved writing their characters and I loved having them in. So it was nice to kind of be naive in that way about like maybe like reader preferences or things like that and just kind of write the book that I wanted to write. So I loved writing them. They, were just characters who had, I think for me, whenever I try to write a secondary character, whether they're adults or children or whatever it is, like I try to think about them as if they were the main character of their own story, right? So they have their own goals and their own wounds and their own fears and their own, so that's kind of how I try to think about every secondary character of like what do they want and where are they coming from and what experiences have they had that have informed the way that they're approaching this relationship that they're in. So yeah, so that's the problem is then I fall in love with all these secondary characters and I'm like, oh, you need a book and you need a book and you need a book and I'm like, oh no, what am I gonna do? It's really bad in Earl Crush. I like Lydia has like these four brothers and they are like all romance heroes. And I don't know, I pitched a series about them, about her brothers to my publisher and they said no. And I'm like, oh no, what do I do? I wrote these four romance heroes. I'm gonna abandon them. So anyway, so I loved writing Freddie and Lou. I really loved Lou, especially like sort of her bravado and kind of the fear that that's covering. And I feel like her arc in the book is really important. And her arc is really important to Peter and to his arc. So I loved writing them.
So, speaking of banter, do you have a specific process for writing your dialogue?
No, I don't. I like to write dialogue. It's very fun. I sometimes it's actually very hard for me to make them stop talking. I'm like, all right, you need to wrap it up here. We're trying to do something. I always say that like the hardest part for me in writing is making my characters move in and out of rooms, which sounds like very goofy, but I really struggle with that. Like I can get them in place and then they just want to like talk or kiss or whatever. It's very hard for me to like, all right, but now you need to go like solve this mystery or whatever it is. So yeah, so no, the dialogue is the easiest part for me to write. I really enjoy writing dialogue. It's very, very fun.
Okay.
Because
So
it's so nice like to write dialogue, right? Like you can think about it for 20 minutes and you're like, ooh, that's a good thing to say. If only you could do that in real life. Like think about it for 20 minutes and then come back to the
Oh, I
conversation.
know. The best lines come like 2 days later, and you're like, oh, I wish I could have
Ooh,
said
in there. Being a writer is much better than being just like a person in the world.
that. I know. So you balance both witty, humorous banter with serious social issues in the novel. How do you ensure that this is balanced and you maintain it throughout the story and it doesn't go off balance where it becomes too serious or it becomes too humorous and kind of loses track of the romance and where you're wanting to go?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean it's I think everybody is going to have their own preference for that, and for what that ideal balance should look like. So really, I'm writing the book that I want it to be, and I'm hoping that readers connect to that as well. I think that what I so I'm like really a character first writer. So I am thinking about the characters and then I design the plot around them. So I think about where they're starting and where they need to go and what that arc needs to look like. And then I make the plot to make that arc happen. So I make the plot to challenge them and to force them to face their fears, right? And to force them to grow for their love interest. So what I end up doing is that these emotions are very real and heartfelt, and the character wounds are very heartfelt. And then I when I'm thinking about plot, I'm like, well, this would be a funny thing to to do to torment them. So I find that like often the plots are where a lot of the sort of the goofiness and the hijinks come in, but the emotions are very serious, and the character arcs are very very heartfelt. And I also just like when I'm brainstorming, like what could happen, like I just think of goofy stuff. I'm a terrible brainstormer for any of my critique partners who don't write comedy. I'm like, what if, what if a bunch of hamsters appeared? And they're like, this is a serious book, like about like trauma. I'm like, oh, right, sorry. So in fact, I'm just a very goofy person. So that's where that comes in. But yeah, I design the plots around kind of making those character moves. That I want and kind of seeing that growth that I want. Okay, so I see someone asked in the comments, how did I design the order of the characters' books? And I will tell you that I didn't. My publisher picked the order, and it was not the order that I would have picked necessarily. But here we are. So I hope that it came out okay.
Well, I guess publishers, I mean, they have their own opinions too, I guess. But um, the other thing is that we were wondering, how do you feel Peter's upbringing in New Orleans influenced his character and his interactions with the British aristocracy?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that was something that I really from the very first envisioned that he would be coming from a different world, a different society, and bringing his own past into that in a variety of different ways. And in some ways, it's very empowering for him that these things that other people care about, that doesn't seem like a big deal to him, right? Like, and it's very like it's like frustrating to Selena, but it's also like a little bit refreshing in a way because she has chafed against many societal restrictions. And so the way that he's just like, well, why should we care? She's like, but you have to care. You can't just not care. But then on the other hand, it is empowering to her to see that someone can take things like reputation and scandal and gossip and point out that like this is not something that actually matters, right? That these are it's it kind of is only as powerful as you allow it to be. And that's something that I guess I was very interested in at that time because I was also kind of writing the Halifax Hellions novellas at the same time, which is really addressing a lot of similar themes, especially for women and how women are kind of treated by society, and become the subject of discussion and conversation and criticism. So I've now forgot. Oh, so Peter's upbringing, right? So, I also felt that it was kind of a fun way to like introduce readers who may not be familiar with historical romance, with like what some of the like tropes are, what some of the expectations are. That he is very much this like fish out of water, and she has to like explain to him like what's okay and what's not okay. So that was a fun. I always think the kind of the fish out of water is always like a really sort of funny comedic trope as well. Like in, like an alien romance. I love an alien romance when the alien like doesn't understand like kissing or, whatever it is. Like I always think that's quite funny.
So Peter is portrayed as a fierce abolitionist. How did you navigate integrating this aspect into a Regency romance setting?
Yeah, so this was interesting because one of the then this came up in Earl Crush as well. It's sort of like how much do you include because that's actually not really what the book's about, right? Like this is a part of his personality, but like discussions around abolition are not like that's not the plot. That's not the plot of the book. So and the same thing kind of came up for me in Earl Crush, which was that like a lot of Lydia's concerns or like that's just not what the book is about. So I really had to balance that and there was a lot of stuff that I had kind of had in various drafts that I ended up having to cut where these questions are like kind of discussed more, but it just wasn't serving the plot of the book. Um so yeah, but what I wanted to do with this is really ground the things that he's doing and talking about in what was actually happening, in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. I think one of the things that happens sometimes when we think about history is it gets kind of flattened. And it's like, oh, well, everyone, like thought slavery was fine, which is just not true, right? That we can look at the historical record and see that people were abolitionists and people were arguing all the time that that British imperialism was not good or that slavery was wrong. Um, and yet I think sometimes that gets kind of like lost. People think like, oh, everyone must have been supporting the status quo, which is definitely not the case. So I wanted to make sure that when he's talking about, about abolition and about the things that he believes in, when we quote his speeches, that's all coming from real people and real texts. So the speech that I sort of quote from him, which is like this very fiery speech, right? It's like the worst thing England's ever done, like the greatest international character. That was from the Prime Minister. Like that wasn't just like some random person. That was the Prime Minister of England was making those claims in the late 18th century. So that was really important to me to just kind of show that complexity of the past that I think can sometimes get lost.
So another thing we were kind of wondering was it a coincidence that a central theme in the book is Selena's passion to bring sexual education information to women who were having it withheld from them with the current day situations of sex education limitations and book banning that are happening in the US?
No, no, no. That was definitely not a coincidence. That was absolutely on my mind, when I was writing the book. And it's really wild because I wrote this book in 2021 and it's 2025. Like and it's worse, if anything. Like it is more upsetting and infuriating every single day. And so it's yeah. I was really mad when I was writing this book in 2021. In fact, I like recently reread some parts of this book to write something and I was like, man, I was really mad. Like I was furious when I was writing this. And and it's very wrenching that it doesn't seem like we're moving in the right direction at all on this topic. But you know, as we see with people in history, you just keep going and you just keep fighting and you just keep working. Yeah. So yeah, no, it's definitely not a coincidence. And they had me write like an author letter, which went out when the book was like an arc. And it went out to like booksellers and stuff like that. And that was like basically what my author letter was about kind of the parallels that I saw and kind of how that informed my writing of the book.
Okay. So this was something that kind of um, we actually talked about as a group when we were reading that we were like, oh, um, I wonder if she has like a backstory in the back of her mind for this couple because they just kind of were interesting to us, Nicholas and Daphne. So her brother
Yeah,
and his wife
yeah.
we're like, wonder what's going on with their relationship. Are they just convenient partners? Are they like, what's going on? I wonder if she has like in the back of her mind them, like how they came to be.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely do. It's sort of quite funny. You like write these characters and there's early drafts where there's a lot more, but then you have to take it out because, you've gone on this tangent that's not really central to, so yes, so I've definitely written like more about them and I'm very fond of them and I think that they're a good couple. They're like a lovely, interesting couple. That, who knows? Maybe someday I'll write them a little prequel or something. But yeah.
So, Alexandra, we have a few questions about the series in general, but before we get into those, we want to pause here and check in with Megan and see if there are any questions in the chat.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I've been like being Professor Alex and like checking the chat.
Well, to be
It's all good.
honest, we have a small enough group that
Group that
if
it's
there
not, yeah.
are questions, I'll let people go off mute and
Yeah,
ask questions right
yeah,
now. So,
yeah. We don't have too many people, so it's okay today. There won't be chaos, hopefully.
so if there are any questions right now about the book specifically, this is a really great time to ask them before we move on to other topics.
I have a
I know,
question.
yeah, Jess has one.
Sorry, I side messaged Megan, but I'll go ahead and ask the question. I wanted to know about the Halifax sisters. I started reading your books with the Halifax sisters before I got to read this one. And I was curious about why you chose to do novellas with them and why they didn't get their own books.
Yes. Okay. So I can tell you this exact thing. So basically, I wrote Ne'er-Do-Well I started in 2021 and finished it in 2022. And this was the first book that I ever tried to publish. I've been writing a really long time, but I had never tried to publish a novel. In fact, for my birthday in 2021, my husband made me like a list of agents, like literary agents who were accepting romance queries. He's like, you've been talking about this for a really long time. You've written several books. Like, maybe you should try. It was very nice. It was very nice. So anyway, it took me quite a while to like get up the nerve, but I did eventually in 2022 get up the nerve to query literary agents. And I got an agent for Ne'er-Do-Well, and we were preparing to for her to send it to editors of publishing houses. And so that's called going on submission. And they say that while you're on submission, you should work on another book, because like take your mind off it, and then if like your book doesn't sell to a publisher, you've got another thing ready to go. And so I had this whole other book that I was like supposed to be writing that I had cleared with my agent, and she liked it, and she read the first couple chapters, and everything was great. And I didn't. And I didn't do it. I wrote these Halifax novellas instead, which I had not run by her and had not in any way discussed with her at all. But I had written this like one sentence in Ne'er-Do-Well. So it's when Selena is kind of going through like all the potential matches, and I kind of wanted to write that classic scene where like the matchmaker like rejects everyone, I always think that's very funny. So I had to come up with all of these like other potential like candidates who were unsuitable for various reasons. So, like, oh, this one likes horses, and then various silly things that she's using to reject them. And then I wrote this like line about the Halifax twins, and oh, they're so wild and they're scandalous, and that's they're great, they're fun, but that's not what Peter needs right now. And I just could not like stop thinking about them, like I had written it and I was like, what is their story? Like, why are they so wild? What are they up to? What's going on? And they were just kind of in the back of my mind, and they didn't really have a story attached to them or anything. I didn't have a plan to write a book about them. But then I had kind of thought like maybe I'll write a novella and like give it on my newsletter. And at the time, I didn't have a social media. I didn't even have a personal social media, let alone an author social media. And I was like, maybe I should like do something to like have the, whatever. And so Melissa was there. Melissa is a founding like creator of the Halifax novellas. We were talking about party tricks, and Melissa was like, I can tie a cherry stem in a knot with my tongue. And I was like, oh, that's really like quite funny. I'm surprised you don't see that more in books, because it's both like comical but also like vaguely erotic. And then somehow in my mind, those two things, Melissa tying a cherry stem in a knot with her tongue, and these Halifax hellions that I had invented, like came together in my mind. And I was like, that's it. That's the story. That's the story that I've been wanting to tell. So without telling my agent or anything, I wrote Margot Halifax. And then I wrote Matilda. And then I got a book deal, and they were like, haha, you can't sell these books because you have a non-compete contract clause in your contract. So I had these things that I like couldn't do anything with. So I asked them if I could send them out on my newsletter for free, and they said yes. So that was what I did. So I sent them out on my newsletter for free, and they, got like a lot of good feedback, and I got a lot of people downloaded them. And then the publisher ended up buying them, and now many years later, they're finally coming out as a print edition next year. Whew, long story. You did not know that was going to happen, but I had to make sure to include the Melissa part of the story.
My one claim to fame.
That's a good one. Cherry cinnamon not with your tongue. Like, who knew?
Yeah, college me was a trip.
All
Did
college.
anyone fall in love with you because of your skills?
Oh no. I
Someone
mean,
messaged me once and was like, "This is
that
how my
maybe could
husband
have
and
been.
I met."
I
So
mean,
it's
that could have been a thing, but no, we actually knew each other in high school. I was friends with his sister, so I'm actually the best friend's older brother trope. Yeah, but
Melissa's
not
a
until
trope.
after college. Yeah, I'm a trope, but not till after college. So yeah.
Oh, goodness. So let's delve into some of this stuff a little bit more, a little deeper. So after Selena and Peter's HOA, readers get to go on a road trip adventure with Lydia, and for her to find her HEA with a Scottish Earl and Earl crush. And I know quite a few of us have gotten our hands on the arc for the third book in the series, Ladies in Hating, which is Georgiana's story and his FF romance. Did you always know that you would have an FF couple in this series, or did that develop as you were writing the first two books and getting to know her and her backstory?
No, so when I originally pitched this to the publisher, I pitched 4 books, which is obviously Ne'er Do Wellhead was already written at the time, and then I pitched a book for each of the debutantes, so Iris, Georgiana, and Lydia. And so Lydia and Georgiana, like they were literally like from the moment that I was like selling it to a publisher, those stories were like the pitches were done. So there was never any kind of other possibility for Lydia and Georgiana. Both their stories were kind of set up from the beginning. And then I had pitched a book about Iris, who was going to get together with Selena's brother Will. And that was going to be the next book. So that was like going to be book 2 in the series. And I don't know why they didn't want that one. They were like, we just want you to skip straight to Lydia. We really like Lydia, do Lydia's book. And then they wanted me to do Georgiana's book because Georgiana is such a big character in Lydia's book. And I was like, what about I was like, well, this will be perfect. Like, it'll be the fourth one and it'll wrap everything up and it'll, everyone will come back and have a little role. And they were like, no. And they wanted me to do a whole new series. So I don't know. I can't just like leave them like sad and alone forever, right? Like, that's terrible.
Well, you answered some of the other questions because that was going to be our next thing was like, is this going to be a trilogy or are we going to see a fourth book with Iris? And what's happening with Lord William? Because you left us dangling with his story.
I
So,
even like put in Ladies in Hating, there's like a scene that like teases like an Iris and Will romance. And I thought for sure they were either going to buy that book or tell me to take that scene out. And they did not. They just were like, what? So here's the thing. I did not know this when I didn't know anything about publishing. And it's actually very hard to sell like a long series. And generally with a series, every book does a little worse than the previous one. So what they really want you to do is like start something new, which makes sense. I mean, I get it. Like when someone like comes to a series, a lot of people are like, well, I'll start at the beginning. And you know what I mean? So like the first one tends to do better and then they do, kind of drop off as you go. So I get it. I get why they didn't want to do the fourth one. However, like it's clearly set up for 4. you know? So, yeah, so I don't know. I really feel like I'm gonna have to like self-publish a fourth one or something. They don't own the rights to the series. They don't own my intellectual property. So if I wanted to self-publish a fourth one, I could. I just have to find like time to write it. But I have this whole book like planned out. There's like a synopsis, there's an outline, I just gotta write it. I think it's really funny too. It's a funny.
You like self-published books too.
Yeah, I do too.
oh goodness. So, that means that covered a whole bunch of our
Yeah, I think
questions
that
right there.
covered.
That takes you
I'll
right down
jump
to
in.
question 21. Also,
Yes. That would be what made you want to start writing romance?
Well, I have always loved romance and I have always read romance and just enjoyed it so much. And even like when I was a kid, like I'd be watching something and like the romance part of the story would be like what I was really like in it for, I'd be like, oh yeah, there's a plot, but like really, are they gonna get together? So I've always loved romance. I have an MFA in creative writing, and they MFA programs are very much like literary focused, and so I was writing this like literary fiction. It was quite, I don't know, it never really felt like good for me. Like my voice, like when I sit down to write, just comes out jokey and comedic, and it was just not a good fit. So when I started writing romance, I really felt like, oh, like this is what I love. This is a good fit for the way that my voice sounds. And I feel really lucky that readers have like responded well to that. And I don't know, romance just makes me happy. And if I'm gonna be spending like hours and hours and hours and my whole life working on something, I want it to be something that's gonna bring me joy and make me happy and hopefully make other people happy too. I didn't really feel like I knew how to write historical romance, which was just always my favorite. Like I always like historical romance was always like my number one. And I didn't really feel like I knew how to do research until after I finished my PhD. I just didn't even know like where you would start. You know what I mean? Like you're writing the scene and like they are gonna fasten their button and you're like, what is the button made of? Like and I didn't even know like where would you begin to try to find something like that. And it really wasn't until after I did my PhD that I felt like I kind of understood research and like understood how you go about finding primary sources and stuff like that. Not that I think you need a PhD, but just for me personally, it wasn't until after I had spent those years doing research that I felt like I personally kind of had the skills I wanted to write in the way that I wanted to write.
Okay. So that kind of answers some of this here because you definitely have the affinity for rom-coms and you definitely were a reader of historical. So is that what drew you to writing historical rom-coms versus going towards contemporary, where there is um, there is much more in rom-com in contemporary?
I think that like the books that I was reading coming up, like, I mean, I read lots of like angsty, good angsty stuff, like Ruth McNall, like I already mentioned, and people like that. But I was reading a lot of more like comedic books, like when I was in my teens and early 20s, like Loretta Chase, I think is like really funny. All right. Or like Amanda Quick was like a really foundational author for me. And Amanda Quick has that kind of like lightness and sort of hijinks and joyfulness to her writing. Julia Quinn was another person that I started reading her before the Bridgerton books. And so I had been reading her for a really long time. And her books are very, like, they're just very witty and, kind of they have that great banter. So I think that, like, that was just a mode I knew in historical romance. I never considered writing a contemporary. I never even tried. In fact, I'm working on a book right now that's set in the contemporary moment, and it's like a nightmare. I'm like, how do I'm like, oh no, they have underwear. Like, what do you call that? You know, like panties, undie. It's just a nightmare. Yeah, so I'm like, quite struggling. I'm very eager to get back to the to the Regency when they don't have any underwear and then just lift up their skirts.
That actually leads into the next question. What made you pick Regency versus another historical era?
Underwear. No, I'm kidding.
No,
Okay. No one has ever asked me this question. I'm very excited about it. I hate the Victorians. I hate them so much. They're so bad. So many like terrible things were instantiated in the Victorian period. Like it's just unreal. Like how much like how regressive politically the Victorian period was, the way that racism became so much more kind of like scientific and treated as this like objective fact, the propaganda that was used for imperialism in the Victorian period, it was like nightmarish. And so I was like, no, thank you. Like, okay, you do have trains, you do have showers, those things are compelling, but I just I just really wanted to write my books on the Regency. Yeah, so I I don't know if I'm ever gonna. So I have I'm contracted for after the Bevoir series. I'm contracted for three more historicals, that are all Regency, and hopefully I'll get to keep writing more historicals after those three. And I don't know if I'm ever gonna leave the Regency. I'm very very fond of of my early 19th century. It was just I think a more for me like a more interesting and I do appreciate why people like the Victorian period. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of change. There's a lot of technological change and like global communication and sort of increasing sense of the global world. So I get it. But for me, the Regency is where it's looser, it's more playful. It's just it's the right spot for me. And there's no underwear to deal with.
Okay. Um, so you're working on a contemporary right now. Um, are there any other subgenres of romance that you'd like to write in? I mean, you mentioned that you read Alien. Would you ever play in writing something this kind of far out there?
Okay, so my
The
book that I'm
aliens
working
don't have to wear
on,
underwear either.
I love alien romance. My book that I'm working on right now is a paranormal. It's a contemporary set paranormal mystery romance. And hopefully I don't know. I thought they were gonna let me talk about it today, but here we are. It's 8:52 and no one has told me I could talk about this. So I'm gonna keep it like slightly whatever. But hopefully like in the next day or two, I'll be able to kind of announce this and talk a little bit more about it. But yeah, so I'm contracted for these paranormal mystery romances that are sort of funny and paranormally and yeah, I'm very excited about them, although I'm really struggling with the underwear situation. Uh like cell phones. I'm like, oh, like all these plot problems. I'm like, or you could just whip out your phone and text someone, problem solved. Oh no, what do I do? This is quite hard. I'm really struggling with that. But yeah, I don't know that I ever see myself writing just like a straight up like contemporary, like in this world. It's just not what I tend to read. So, it's just not my first love. But I love fantasy and romantasy. I love paranormal. I grew up reading paranormal and love it so, so, so much. Um, I would totally write an alien romance. Absolutely. I would love that. Yeah, so I like things with a little bit of a kind of fantastical element to them. And for me, that definitely includes historical romance because, we are kind of writing a little bit in a kind of fantasy alternative version of the 19th century.
So this next thing is actually about what are your writing processes like? Are you a plotter or a pantser?
I'm definitely a plotter. I like to have everything fully outlined. It doesn't always work, you know what I mean? Like sometimes I write to the outline and then I read it, I'm like, no, that actually wasn't very good. You gotta delete that scene. Earl Crush was my biggest struggle so far of any book that I have written. I have 84,000 deleted words, which is a whole book, a whole other book. So I stuck with my outline and it did just turn out to not really work for the characters that I had created. But I am a plotter. I like to have a very detailed outline. For me, I'm always amazed when authors say like they jump around from scene to scene, not in order, because if I did that, I would only write the fun scenes and then I just wouldn't do anything else. Like there would be no other scenes. It would just be the stuff that I like. So I need to have that like, carrot, like, oh, okay, I gotta get through this really, like for me, I struggle with like characters fighting or being sad. I hate writing that. So I like have to know, like, okay, like you gotta get through this fight, but then you get to the love declaration, which I love to write. So yeah, so for me, I kind of have to write in chronological order so that I can force myself to get through the hard stuff, knowing like that well-earned HEA is coming. I saw someone on social media say like my favorite thing to write is the third act breakup, and I was like, I hate making my characters sad. Then I'm like depressed until I can like pull them out of it, like if they're sad, and it takes a long time to write a book, you know what I mean? So like if they're sad for like 3 chapters, that's like 2 weeks that I'm depressed.
Um, I think we have some authors we've interviewed who are definitely the type of authors who like to torture their characters.
Yes.
So I don't know how they get through that, but
Kennedy Ryan.
Katie Ryan likes to torture her
That makes
characters, and I'm
sense.
not
I
really
see that.
sure how she does it. But
That's why she writes such beautiful angst and I write so much goofiness.
nice. Um, do you have a favorite trope as an author that you like to work with?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think that maybe this is everyone's favorite like thing that you do a lot, but like having opposites, having the characters be like opposing personalities is really fun. And it just gives a lot of room for them to kind of banter and play off of one another. Um, so yeah, so that's why I think so many people write like Order Chaos, or like, the Grumpy Sunshine. Like it's just very fun to write that. And that was why I struggled so much with Earl Crush, because I didn't do that. So I I always say that like I take these characters too seriously. Like I feel like they are real people. So like I had invented Lydia in Ne'er Do Well, and she has social anxiety that is like really something that is tough for her to grapple with. And she's shy and she's reserved. And I was like, all right, like I'm designing, her perfect partner. And I was like, well, I'm not gonna pick someone who's like super outgoing and want to like go out every night because like she's gonna be miserable. She's gonna hate that. So I wrote her this kind of like reclusive, shy, reserved man. Well, listen, two shy, reserved characters is not good to write a novel because they wouldn't do anything. They would not do anything. They would just stare at each other and like yearn really powerfully. And I had written like half the book and they had not done anything. They had like moved their pinky fingers like a little closer. I was like, okay, we're 180 pages in. We need to we need to speed it up, guys. So I really had to change the plot that I had designed around them and really like ne'er do well. Selena and Peter really like they drive the plot. Like they're they're constantly going out and doing things to like, cause explosions. And in Earl Crush, the plot happens to Lydia and Arthur. They are tormented by the plot. The plot, attacks them over and over. And that was just because of their characters.
They have to rise to the occasion on a
They have to
regular
rise to the
basis.
occasion. Exactly, exactly. So anyway, so that's a very long answer of saying that my favorite thing to work with is definitely kind of when the characters are opposing. And it's doable when they're not, but it definitely makes it harder. I just finished my Rake Wallflower book. My first time writing that trope. And now I see why it is so popular because it was so fun. It was so much fun. And I thought that the most fun part was going to be like writing my wallflower kind of like blossom, and like find her own strength. And that was fun. That was satisfying. But no, like the really fun part was torturing this rake. And having him like he doesn't understand why he's like on his knees begging for her to like look at him. Yeah, it was so great. It was so fun. So I just finished that, which is very much kind
Discovering emotions.
yeah. Yeah. No, he's a kind of an emotional rake. He has a lot of emotions. He's a rake with feelings.
So, this actually concerns the genre of historical romance. How are you focusing on marketing or finding an audience given the current publishing environment in regards to historical romance?
Yeah. I get this type of question a lot, and I'm never like totally sure like exactly what to say because I feel like a couple of things are true. One is that it is very noticeable to me as someone who's been reading historical romance for 25 years, like it's a much smaller portion of the market, like it is like when I was growing up reading, half of romances were historical, if not more. Like it was easy to find historical. And now it is just such a smaller portion of the market. And it's hard to say why that is. I think that the demise of mass markets has had a big impact on that. So I don't know if this is like deep publishing lore, but basically there is a company called ReaderLink that was in charge of distributing 90% of the mass markets in the US. So they distributed them to Walmarts and grocery stores and airports basically everywhere you would find a mass market, they would take them from the publisher and put them in these places. So very important for mass markets. And they announced that after 2025, they won't be doing that anymore. So mass markets are basically over. There pretty much won't be mass markets after 2025. Ne'er-do-well was supposed to get a mass market and they canceled it because, which again, totally understandably, like it's not going to be in stores. Why would they print, 10,000 copies of it if no one's going to be able to buy it? So I think that that's been hard, a hard shift. I think covers like of older historical romances don't necessarily appeal to people who've come in through contemporary. So like my covers being illustrated, that was one of the things I asked for when I was talking to editors about like who was gonna buy Ne'er-do-well. I really wanted a cover that had like an illustrated people on it, and I wanted it to be trade size, which now, like looking back, I'm like, that was very lucky that that was what I wanted. Because that's clearly like where the market has gone. I was just happened to luck out with my desires there. Um, so I don't know. I think a lot of people who like younger people, like I go to our book club at my local indie. I go to our romance book club every month. And a lot of them find that they really enjoy. So it's a very young crowd. I'm like this ancient crone, I feel like when I show up there. And a lot of them have never read a historical, and they find that they really like them when they do read them. They just wouldn't necessarily have picked them up. So for me, what I'm hoping that I can do with my books is kind of make them like an invitation to this genre that I love so much and have loved for so long. So that was why I wanted trade size. That was why I wanted an illustrated cover. And I try to write them in what I hope is like an intentionally accessible style so that they feel like you can kind of jump straight in. You don't necessarily have to like have prior knowledge about the period or about historical romance in general. So that's what I'm trying to do, is just like invite more people into the genre that I love so much. I don't know what the future holds. Like I said, I have historicals. I'll be doing a new novel in 2026, 2027, and 2028. So that's what I can say for myself for the next couple years. Yeah, but I don't know, we'll see. But I do think like a lot of people would like them. We just need to like get them to try them.
Yeah.
Well,
I
my
mean,
personal belief is the same people who like, quote unquote romantasy would actually like historical, because I feel like it's a lot of the same things that you go for, like with it's aristocracy in both things. It's that same type of, I think, feeling sometimes. I think you're right that maybe they haven't had them. Like, we all grew up feeling our mom's books.
Right,
yeah, we
right.
grew up on them, so we're used
Yeah,
to like things.
that's what we had. And you're right, they were like in every airport, every grocery store, like, it was I actually remember reading my first Julia Quinn because we were traveling and I needed a book to read, and it was like in an airport store, and I'm like, "Oh, this looks good."
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? I mean, the reason you read a book is because someone tells you it was good, right? Like
Mhm.
90% of the time, the reason someone picks up a book is because they're like, "Oh, I heard this is really good." You know what I mean? And so we just need to get like, Gen Zers to like find our historicals and tell their friends like, "Oh, I read this and I actually really liked it." And then, we've caught a new one in our web of historical romance. I mean, of course, it's perfectly fine that some people don't love historical romance. Like my mom prefers contemporary, and that's okay. But I think that many people would love them, if they tried them. So I'm hoping we can continue to invite more people.
So, how does your day job impact your romance writing and research?
Yeah, so I'm a professor, and I love my job. People sometimes ask me like if I would quit it to be a full-time author, and I would not quit. I love my day job. I love being in the classroom. I love teaching. It's just really fun and like very affirming for me and rewarding. Um, so I think that a couple of things. I think that like I mentioned, like having gotten my PhD and learning a lot about research was really helpful. And being so I studied British literature, so like going to the UK many times was very helpful. I'm actually going this summer, and I'm going to be in Cornwall, which I'm very excited about because that's where the next series is set. Um, so that's been super helpful. I also think that it's helpful the other way too. Like I'm writing these books and putting them out there and getting feedback and getting reviews and whatever. And I ask my students to like write things for me and then I give them feedback on it. And it's really helpful to remember like how vulnerable it is to put your writing out there, right? So I think that it really informs my work both in both directions, in ways I think is really important.
So we actually had several questions submitted to us to ask about your inspiration for your newsletter and how or why you got started on that before you were actually published. So you talk about that timeline process of writing the series and the novellas and then how like you went to the newsletter first.
Yeah, well, so the reason that I did that way was because I was in a publishing contract with my publisher for the first series, which is St. Martin's. So yeah, so I had kind of written the first novella while I was waiting to see if someone was gonna acquire Ne'er-do-well, which they did. And then when I was in this publishing contract, so a lot of people don't realize that like that I wrote Ne'er-do-well first because I put the first novella on my newsletter in 2022 and Ne'er-do-well didn't come out till 2024, but publishing is really, really, really slow. Is I mean the print edition of the Halifax Science isn't not coming out till 2026. So like it's publishing is just really slow. So anyway, so I had written Margot and and I was in the process of writing Matilda when Ne'er-do-well sold. And they were like, sorry, you can't sell them. And I had originally sort of had the notion that maybe I would put one on my newsletter and like maybe one like on KU. And then I thought maybe they would sort of like influence each other. Because if you've read the Halifax Hellions, like the first two, they really, you kind of need them both. Like they're almost like two halves of the same story. So I kind of thought like, oh, maybe people sign up for my newsletter and then they'll want the second one and they'll go buy it on KU, or maybe someone will discover it on KU and then they'll find, want to come back to my newsletter to get the other half. But that was like maybe a good idea that I never got to test out because because I sold Ne'er-do-well. Um and yeah, so part of my contract was a non-compete, was that I couldn't put the novellas, like I couldn't sell them. I couldn't put them on retail sites. I don't know. So I wanted to publish them. I wanted to get them out there. I wanted to kind of start. I knew Ne'er-do-well wasn't going to come out for like almost 2 years because publishing is so slow. So I wanted to kind of just like start interacting with readers and have something to post about on social media that I had just created like 2 days prior. So I did, and I asked them if I could put them out for free on my newsletter. So that was how that transpired. So I see in the chat, how did I get a newsletter following before a book? I didn't have a newsletter following. I had 79 subscribers, which is like, you know what I mean? Like not nothing, but it's certainly not like like I wasn't even in the 3 digits. It was just like my friends, basically. And yeah, so when I sent out Margot, I had 79 newsletter subscribers. And then which was really just word of mouth. Like people were saying like, "Oh, I read this and there's another one coming and you should sign up for the newsletter and read them." And that was 100% how yeah. And so then eventually when they started to really like take off, then the publisher ended up acquiring them. And I think they had by like when I had to finally pull them, I think they had like 20,000 downloads. So they really I don't know how that happened.
So, if someone's new to your work, where do you suggest that they start? With the series or the novellas? What's the best way to dive into your world?
That's a fun question that no one has ever asked me. I think that I would say just like if you are like want to try it and you like novellas, like I would definitely say like try the novellas, right? Because they're short, they're sort of bite-sized. You can read the first one like easily in a day. Um, However, a lot of people don't like novellas. Like they really want that full novel to dig into. So if you're not a novella fan, then I would definitely say start with the novels, and then if you want a little more. I also have on my newsletter a free like I wanted to always have something where you could like try out my work. So once the publisher acquired the Halifax Hellions, I wrote like a new newsletter novella, which was very fun. I had like in my stories on Instagram, this was if you guys know Erin Langston, this was Erin Langston's idea. We were talking and we were like, wouldn't it be funny if I had people vote on what the book should be about? But I knew I wanted to have like another newsletter novella, so I put in my stories like a poll of like what should the hero be like? What should the heroine be like? What should the premise be? And people voted, and I kind of came up with this. I think the premise was what was it? Like a stern working class man and a grumpy wallflower are literally trapped together. That was like what people, like the various pieces that people voted for. And then I sort of designed this newsletter novella around the premise. So anyway, so I do still have that. So if people want to try my work for free, you can sign up for my newsletter and grab that freebie.
So then, what kind of responses have you heard from readers that have either surprised or delighted you?
I'm always very like stunned and delighted when people say that my books were their first historical romance, because historical romance has meant so much to me, just for such a long time. So that's always so gratifying that like I feel like I can. Well, hopefully they liked it. This is my first historical romance. I've never read another one. No, hopefully if people, read it and are interested in reading more in the genre, that's really delightful and gratifying. I
So,
like, people want to ask me like, what do I want readers to get out of the book? And I want them to be like joyful and affirming, and I want the message to be that everyone deserves love. But I also like want them to be fun. Like that's really what I want. Like I want people to read them and have fun. So I always like to hear that when someone had a good time.
so we're going to move back to fun questions to wrap up the evening. But before we do that, I'm going to open up. Megan, did we have any other questions in the chat that we should answer?
Melissa was just wondering, so when you see that your like outline isn't working, like for example with Earl Crush, what do you do? Like how do you handle that?
Cried, wept. I don't know. No, I mean, it was really clear about like halfway through the book that there wasn't enough like propelling the story forward. And because I had written 180 pages and nothing else happened, like, emotionally, like plot had happened. But nothing had happened like between the characters in the way, and I couldn't seem to get them into a situation that felt natural. So I just had to replot it. I had to just sit down and kind of re come up with different plot events that would get me to that emotional arc that I wanted. Yeah, like I said, that is the one that I have thrown away the most words. I would say usually I have probably like 40,000 words of deleted scenes, which is a lot, but it is what it is. But yeah, that one I have 84,000 words, which again, that is the length of a book. That is a whole book of deleted scenes.
Oh, goodness.
I'm actually curious. What is your favorite Amanda Quick book? Because I actually
I'm really
adore
bad
the original one. Like I love the mysterious and all those ones.
I'm really bad with the titles of them because they're all like the single words and I forget which
Yes.
was which. But the one where with the fossils, where they're in the cave,
Yes, yes.
ravished? Is that ravished? Yes. Okay.
I
Yeah.
think that's my favorite too.
It's well because it is superior. It is so delightful. It's so wonderful. We also read in our face. We have a Facebook group. Me and my fellow historical romance author Felicity Niven. We read these times so bad. I want to say Desire. It's like teal. It's a historical with like a perfumery.
I think
Um,
that's what you're right. Yeah.
um and that's another really fun one. It's a medieval. But yeah, Ravished. That's my number one.
Oh, goodness. So we'll go back around one last time and open up and have everyone ask questions at the very end. But these last questions are what we call rapid fire, and they're just what they sound like, quick round robin style. Whatever pops in your head, say it, and we move on to the next one.
Yeah.
So we'll start with the first one. Favorite liquid fuel while writing?
Coffee.
If you could only have one streaming service, which one would you choose?
Spotify.
If are you an early bird or a night owl?
Night owl.
Paper, e, or audio?
E. I feel like I shouldn't say that, but it's true.
Old eyes. Best escape. Winter mountain getaway, warm island hideaway.
Warm island. 1000%.
Tall, dark, and handsome, or blonde and beefy?
I'm gonna say tall, dark, and handsome.
Speed reader or poring over every line?
Speed reader.
All right. And now we're going to say, if you guys can come off mute, you can ask questions. Open floor.
I have another one. It's both an endorsement for Earl Crush and a question. So I love the book. I lost some sleep over it. But I thought it was particularly unique. And I haven't read as many historical, obviously, as you have. So, but I thought that, the writing to the Earl of Stanhope, or was it the Duke of Stanhope? The main character, and not knowing, that it was him. Like you see that with Eloise Bridgerton, but like the switch over that wasn't actually the person that she thought I was writing to, like, that was unique. But what I thought was really interesting was that there was this not a marriage of convenience trope, which you see a lot in Regency, but more of the fake dating, but they were fake married. And I've never seen that before. So I was just curious, like, was it challenging to write what's more of like a contemporary kind of theme into a Regency era book?
Yeah, I'm sure that I've read like I'm trying to like invent that, but I will say that my critique partners were like, Alex, you cannot do this. Like, if you're fake married in the Regency, you're just married. Like, they can't go back from this. So I had to like really like try to like work it in where I was like, but no one knows it's her, so it's fine. And they could potentially, just to like add that tension. Because yeah, my critique partners were like, this does not work in historical. They're fake married, they're just married. It's over. So I did have it was a little bit of a challenge. Yeah, I also I don't know, maybe I just like to like do things that are difficult because I also had this idea that she thinks she's been writing to him and it's actually not him. And you know what? The like writing to the person trope is like a good trope because they fall in love via letter. And I just had to do away with that. Like, would have been quite easy. It would have been so much easier if they had like got to know each other. Be like, no, I just did not. I had to be like, oh yeah, that's just his brother. So it was just like, you know what I mean? Like tropes work for a reason actually, and when you try to do something completely opposite, you like really make your life hard.
Oh, or say, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it, but bringing the brother back around at the very end, that was definitely, I was like, ooh.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to bring him back. I always knew he was going to come back at the end. And it's been fun and funny to see like different reader reactions. Like some readers like really love him and some readers really hate the brother. So it's been fun to have him show up at the end and see what people think.
Oh, it was delightful. It was a delightful, I call it a road trip novel because I loved, that is a theme in historicals when they get put in a carriage and they have to go from point A to point B and they're just stuck. Like, I love those novels because, like, always the most crazy hijinks happen on those.
I love a road trip. I
Love
love
a road trip.
so much. Yeah.
So.
In my Rake Wildflower book, there's like a boat trip. So I'm just like very slightly deviating from my favorites.
A lot of shenanigans on those boats.
Yeah. Okay, but like I see why there's not a ton of boats because the amount of research I had to do for this book. I have read so many books about boats for like 4 chapters, you know?
You need to talk to Loretta Chase about it.
I don't know Loretta Chase, so I'm just show up and send her an email and tell me about boats.
She's very friendly. You can reach out to her and she will chat about it.
She's fun.
She is very friendly and she is very willing to share.
Good to know.
So, but yeah. So, um, next 4 books we'll
I
have.
just thought I do. Yeah, right. Exactly. Every book from now on is a boat book.
Oh, goodness. All right. Anyone else, guys, have questions before we close out?
Thank you all so much for coming and for chatting and for reading the book, or books, plural. It's been a delight, and I'm very honored that you chose my book for your month.
Well, thank you for joining us. We've had just a delightful time this month reading the book. So, and thank you for joining us tonight and giving us
Everyone had a great time and reading it from the beginning, which was like so much fun. And it did break Donna out of a
a
slump.
really
She
bad
told
rut.
us. Yes.
Yay, I love hearing that.
Yeah. I literally just got the arc for the third one this week, so I'm really excited to start reading it.
Good. I hope you like
Okay.
it. Thank you.
So, yeah. All right, guys. I'm going to let you guys go, and I will have the recording posted by tomorrow, okay? All right.
Bye.
Good night,
Thank you so much.
everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Night.